This is Kurt Anderson, and I'm talking to a guy who calls himself Mr. Media, but he won't tell me his first name.
Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to Jamie Malanowski, author of The Book of Levon, The Trials and Triumphs of Levon Helm. Stick around. This ramble through time and space comes with its own soundtrack. So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview. The show is brought to you today by Amazon.com, the world's greatest store for everything from books and movies to computers, TVs, and even my favorite soft drink, Pepsi Wild Cherry. Thinking about buying something online from Amazon or just want to do a little window shopping? You can save yourself a lot of money and help support Mr. Media, that's me, by clicking on one of the Amazon ads at MrMedia.com and start your shopping with us. Get yourself the new iPad or Kindle Fire. Feeling a little racy today? Amazon's got what you need to feel exciting and new, as they used to sing on The Love Boat. Remember, start your next shopping trip from the comfort of your own home, car, hotel, or office with Amazon.com at MRmedia.com. That's right, MrMedia.com. And folks, thanks for your support. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of woodland nymphs with a great sense of rhythm in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. I can't imagine what it must have been like to be musician Levon Helm. So much raw talent, so much enthusiasm for what he did in life, so many loyal friends and anonymous admirers, and yet so much professional and personal frustration. Now, most of us know Helm best from the 1978 Martin Scorsese documentary, The Last Waltz, which captured the breakup of the band in which Helm was a vital part alongside Robbie Robertson, Rick Danko, and the rest of the guys. Now, but the band, for those who don't know the ubiquitously named rock outfit, was long known for backing first Ronnie Hawkins and then Bob Dylan for many, many years before establishing its own brand. The breakup of the band, and in particular Robertson's role in tearing it asunder, by the way, that's a word I chose to use for the man who wrote about Abraham Lincoln, uh, that left Helm bitter and frustrated for most of the next 35 years before his death, April 19th, 2012, a year ago, basically. Jamie Malanowski, former editor at Spy, Esquire, and Time, has written an ebook, The Book of Levon, The Trials and Triumphs of Levon Helm. It catches us up on the post-waltz era of Helm's life. It presents us with a profile of a man who, though often down on his luck, never let go of his musical gifts and always found a way to keep the world entertained. Along the way, he engendered a tremendous amount of loyalty, too. Now, you can download the Book of Levon right now for as little as $2.99 from Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, BN.com. Now, this is Malanowski's second visit to Mr. Media. He was last here to discuss his fascinating Abraham Lincoln history, and the war came, the 6 months that tore America apart, or as I like to say, asunder. Jamie Malanowski, welcome back to Mr. Media.
Thank you very much. I wish I had thought of that asunder thing, but you got
you got to tie all these books together, right?
it's true. An asunder theme.
Uh, fine print stuff. You know all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, Jamie, for a lot of people, Levon Helm and the band are almost a religious experience in my own experience. But admittedly, for everyone else, I don't know. Can you kind of explain the attraction and the ongoing interest in them?
The band was when they kind of burst on the scene in 1969, 1970, were a very different kind of group. They fit in to the events of the time in an interesting way because they, um, while so many bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and others were pushing the limits of content and also recording styles, these five guys, four of them Canadian and Helm from Arkansas, went back to roots Americana kind of music and played, the fiddle, played the old organ, went back to rhythm and blues and country and gospel, and at a time when America was kind of being ripped apart, they went back and traveled through a kind of a real America, get back to the roots America, that kind of really spoke to people and caught their attention. And so they had this kind of more, I don't know, authentic, basic, roots kind of approach to things that just really caught attention. And they had, 3 or 4, 5 year run where they were speaking in a different way to the turmoil of the times by speaking to a kind of hearkening to a truer kind of American approach to music. So that was their appeal.
Who were their counterparts in that time? I mean, I think, as broadly as Jackson Browne, the Eagles, the Allman Brothers, maybe even Skinner at one extreme. Am I in the right?
That's pretty much the list. I mean, the Allman Brothers Band to the Eagles a bit too. I mean, the country rock. Neil Young was also in that group, and then there were people more on the countryside, like Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, who were tipping and getting more rock elements into more traditional country music. So that was about the group of people who were. Bob Dylan, of course, went through a very countrified period. Linda Ronstadt had a lot of those elements.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, at that time, it was a very strong element on popular radio. I mean, it was, in heavy rotation. And also on, what we now think is classic rock has lots of those elements.
It's funny to think that that was, if you compare what would be considered mainstream rock today to what was mainstream rock in the 70s with the band and the Eagles and stuff, it's just like it's two completely different birds.
Yes, it's true. A lot of the, a lot of it was kind of broomed out of the room when, in the late 70s between, the dance music, disco kind of stuff, and then also the arrival of new wave kind of broomed that out. But a lot of it ended up going over to country. And so people like Keith Urban and the Zac Brown Band and, what are they doing? But they're working that vein very strongly.
The biggest difference, I would think, between the early 70s guys doing the kind of country rock that we're talking about and the guys who are country now but have that kind of rock element is more political, I would think. That, Zac Brown or Keith Urban, some of these guys, I don't know their exact politics, but a lot of them tend to skew far more conservatively than the guys who are doing similar music a generation ago.
I guess that's true, although, if you look at the band's music, there's nothing particularly overtly political about it. It was more the lifestyle and the way they presented themselves. And even then, they weren't so much revolutionary or anti-establishment as kind of withdrawing from the establishment. We're just going to go up to the hills in Woodstock and smoke our pot and make our music. So to the degree that that's revolutionary, that was them. But I mean, how different is that than Nashville? Certainly it seems less corporate, but I don't know that the music I think all those folks can get in a room together and play music together and be very happy making the same kinds of sounds.
So what drew you to tell this story? Was it, and did you know Levon at all during his lifetime?
No, I wish I could say I did. I
Hmm.
had seen him perform a couple of times. Um, I was just drawn uh, to his story of you always wonder what happens to these rock artists who disappear and then they come back and they do oldie shows, and you sometimes think that's fairly ridiculous, but then you wonder, well, this is their gift. They have an audience. People still want to hear the music. It's what they like to do. Why not? And I was first drawn to it a few years ago when I read about what Levon was doing at the Ramble, which was him putting on shows in his home in Woodstock for 100 or 150 people at a time. And it sounded just amazing, that they would do these intimate shows with these top flight performers in this very homey atmosphere. And it caught my attention right away. And it took me a while to finally get up there, but when I finally went to one, it just really kind of blew me away. It was an experience. One has seen good music in small clubs, but this was even more intimate. And the relationships between the musicians on stage was so generous to one another, and there was such warmth and such a closeness that it was a unique experience.
And describe when you say this is intimate. This is in the barn, right? That he had built.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe describe that a little bit for people who haven't read this yet.
Helm built a barn in 1970. He had it hand built by a fellow townsman from Woodstock named Ralph Schultes, who did everything, hand sawed the wood and did all the mortise and tenon stuff all by hand. And it's an old style barn with living quarters built in, and Helm had his studio installed there. So and it's kind of wonderful because it's this old warm colored wood with this 35 high peak ceiling. So you get this feeling it's a very churchy type atmosphere, and it adds to it because there is a balcony built in on three sides that has hard benches, and so you immediately think you're like in a choir loft, and so it is that kind of it's just built with that kind of spacing and structure that it suggests a religious kind of place. And go ahead.
So you got to see him perform in one of the Rambles. One or more than one, or?
I just got to one.
Okay.
And I saw him, and it was in 2011. And I knew he'd been ill, and he was that night. He was pretty. He only sang a couple songs. His voice was sort of really scratchy that night, and so I saw him a year later in Tarrytown, which is near where I live in New York, and he seemed in much better voice. And then a month later, he was dead, and I thought, wow, did I see his last performance? As it turned out, I missed it by one, but. I began to think, I know the story of this, and not too many people do. That although the Bramble had been written about, it had gone beneath the radar of a lot of people, and I thought, well, I could really track this down, and I was interested in doing it because this of the kind of long middle period of his life where he was in a kind of professional and personal limbo or purgatory, or whatever you want to call it, and how he kind of recovered and refound his creative mojo. I thought was a very moving story.
And then you got back up there were you there for the Memorial Ramble as well?
No, I didn't. I was there. I have been back there again. I was there for there was a big all-star show tribute concert in October in New Jersey in the Izod Center, which was an amazing show. Folks can see, well, they have released the DVD of it, they've released the CD of it, you can see clips of it on YouTube. So they had a wonderful, wonderful cast, and Lucinda Williams and John Hyatt and Greg Allman, and just and then a lot of young artists out of Nashville, Eric Church, and Dierks Bentley. Joe Walsh came and really sort of stole the show with his rendition of Up on Cripple Creek, which was just hilarious. And Grace Potter, who's a very beautiful young woman with a wonderful voice, did a version of I Shall Be Released that seemed a little canned at first, and then, man, in the last verse and a half or whatever, she just exploded on it and made it really memorable. So it was a great show, and for people who are fans of Levon, who it's been played on, parts of it have been played on a lot of PBS stations in the last month. So I really encourage folks to look out for that because I think they'll enjoy that.
So it's interesting that you chose this topic for, and this is kind of it's somewhere between like a long magazine piece and a short book. It's
right.
Kind of right. That seems a fair.
It's a tweener.
A tweener. There you go.
Yes, it's about 12,000 words. So it's like you get like three magazine articles
for your $2.99.
Exactly.
So you're people who know you as a great magazine writer. You've been an editor of magazines, a spy, of course. But you didn't come to this with a background as a music writer. And I'm kind of wondering, how were you accepted by the people around Helm who you obviously spoke to and did research with? How did that go, and how's that gone since the book has come out?
It's all fine. I mean, they were some of them were very, very nice. Larry Campbell, who was headed the Levon Helm band, essentially was like sort of musical director and has played with Levon for 6 or 8 years, has been very generous to me. And Teresa Williams in the band, Amy Helm spoke to me. I mean, I haven't had no difficulties, and I think the fact is that people sort of did expect people who write about music to be interested in the music per se, but this isn't much about the music per se. This is really about what Levon went through, and I think that's really where the story is. When the band broke up, he didn't want the band to break up. Robbie Robertson was the force behind breaking it up, and the thing is, I think Levon, he had a deep emotional commitment to it. These men were his brothers. He loved it, and it gave him his, I'm Levon Helm from the band. I mean, this was his identity through, and it had brought him great wealth and stature. He's playing for 650,000 people at Watkins Glen. It's amazing. And Helm and Robertson wanted to give all that up for whatever reason. I mean, and part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that Robbie ended up doing a lot of the administrative work. I mean, he ended up doing, while the other guys were pretty much partying hardy, Robbie was the one that had to do all this, talk to the lawyers and the accountants. And I think he got tired of it. I think he got tired of shepherding some of these. Richard Manuel was pretty much an alcoholic. I think he needed a lot of tender, loving care, and I think Robbie didn't want to do it. So he broke it up, and I think that really hurt Levon beyond calculation. I think it was something he carried with him all his life.
Carry that weight. They seem like, I mean, they from reading the book, they seem like they were estranged pretty much from the Last Waltz, which was actually recorded in '76 and released in '78 as a film. But from that point forward, did you talk to Robertson?
I did not speak to Robertson, no. But it's very difficult to go back and kind of umpire or pick the threads out of what went on between people so long ago. They have versions, but I don't necessarily think of these as reliable versions of events anymore. I think they've been so colored by emotion and subsequent events that I wouldn't even really think they were necessarily trustworthy. All you really know is that one pulled the plug, and the other thing is that Levon talks in his memoir about fighting this decision and so forth. But you really wonder, you know, did he have a clever enough lawyer? I mean, did he, you know, could he not have done more to, you know, make his, you know, to impose his will, you know, on Robertson? I mean, he could have not participated in the Last Waltz. You know, he was not under any obligation to do that. And so,
Kind of get the sense that the way deals and relationships among musicians and bands were in the 60s and 70s, it's very different today. It's probably a lot more corporate now. Everyone has a business relationship to the band. And we heard there was some death metal band or heavy metal band recently that threw its drummer out on the eve of touring Australia, and there's 100,000 tweets and Facebook notes about it. You know, maybe in a different era that this would have ended differently. Also, I think you're right. I don't think the lawyers cared or were as sophisticated in the late 60s, early mid 70s about the music business to maybe make the best deal for their clients or
exactly. I think we're all more sophisticated about business and, you know, sports business, music business. And the other thing is that although Levon has a reputation for a temper and for, you know, a kind of cantankerousness, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a confrontational person. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't really know that he had it in him to fight Robbie. As I say, you read what you can read about these things, and then you realize these are pretty much young men in their mid-20s who are not fully emotionally formed, who are, you know, not necessarily have all the skills in the world, you know, and people make mistakes. But the thing I'm certain of is that there was a deep love, you know, on Levon's part for the whole enterprise. And I think it broke his heart that this happened. And like a marriage that goes under, a romance that goes under, I think he carried the weight.
Do you think, you know, we don't know exactly Robertson's story. Do you think that this weighed on Helm far more than it did Robertson, that it was maybe even kind of a one-sided grudge? That Robertson just moved on with his life. Helm never really quite got past it.
Yeah, you know, I don't know the answer to, you know, I had a friend who knows a lot about this, and he says maybe Robbie was just more middle class, you know, and just had more, you know, interest in the business, and just was able to, wasn't just as committed, had other commitments, you know, in a way. It's hard to suss it out at long distance. You know, I know that Robbie has ended up being played as the bad guy in all this. Right. And it's because, you know, he had ended up with the music publishing, which was worth a lot of money, you know, and it was theoretically for songs that the others say we kind of wrote collaboratively. Again, one doesn't really know how you can do an autopsy on a song, you know, or you know, CSI music, and you know, find out who wrote what when. I mean, you know that Levon was very unhappy about, deeply unhappy about not getting his share, particularly since Robbie wrote about, put into musical form, a lot of experiences that Levon was talking about as a raconteur. But, you know, is some of this, you know, things that, you know, Robbie knew how to make into music that Levon really didn't know how to make into music. You know, it's a confusing thing. I mean, Levon hasn't didn't write any songs later,
right?
You know, and so anyway, it's easy. It's pretty easy to think, geez, they should have all been friends and done what you know, Lennon and McCartney did, and which is just say, you know, whatever either of us writes, we're going to credit to both of us and make it simple that way, and people were happy with that. But they didn't do that, and that was a source. You know, you wonder if that is the source of bitterness, or is that is the more emotional hurt the thing that really is the source of the bitterness, and this is the thing that then gets pointed to. You know, um,
Maybe you may have just been onto something. A great reality show idea. CSI pop song, right? And you go back and do like a reality show take on where did these famous lines come from? Who actually wrote them? And is the right person being credited?
it's been a great talking to you, Bob. I gotta go over to VH1. Story. I'll be there the rest of the day.
Listen, if Baba Booey and John Hine could make a show on VH1 on collecting crap, this can't be any worse.
Right. Right.
So sorry, guys. The thing with Levon Helm, okay, so maybe he didn't have the writing chops that Robertson did. We don't actually know, but like you said, he didn't have the same production after the band broke up of writing songs that he was credited for before. But is the reason he stands out? I mean, there's a lot of '60s and '70s pop stars, rock stars, if you will, who've had interesting stories. Does he stand out because of his personal charisma, because of his musicianship? What makes him a more apt person to write a short book like this about than, I don't know, any one of 100 or 1,000 other people?
It is his charisma. It is his personality. It is his kind of authenticity. He is a great musician. His drumming is really widely admired. His singing voice, for me, is, it's one of those rare, authentic American voices that when you hear it, is just takes you to a certain place that doesn't exist anymore. He's singing from some place in a long lost part of America. He possessed a repertoire of music in all kinds of forms that was astonishing. Very generous, not only with any kinds of goods that he had, but with his musicianship and playing and his inclusiveness. He just had there's a lot of stories just about no pretension to him. Gives away things, gives away his drumsticks to admirers, just easygoing as can be. And there was a whole dark period where the thing that I think continued to carry him was that he was just generous in terms of his time and availability and personality to anyone and everyone who came along. And I think that sustained him through a lot of times that, when he wasn't recording much and wasn't going very far, people like Ringo Starr brought him onto tours, and Roger Waters included him in performances. And when he finally got the Ramble going, he had 1 million friends, and they continued, they all came and showed up, and, Elvis Costello and Emmylou Harris and, all Mumford and Sons when they were just starting, and Chris Christopherson, you can go on and on, the people who, had met him and who had become friends with him.
Well, before we finish, I want to change gears on you a little bit. I want to ask you about the magazine business.
Yeah.
Something, we both have an interest in. You've spent a lot of time at a higher level than I did, but I'm kind of curious to get your take on the general magazine business. Since the last time we spoke, which would be 2011, I want to get this right. Newsweek is basically shut down its print edition, and it really has no presence as far as I'm concerned. Time Inc. can't seem to find a buyer. Playboy looks shaky at best. And Esquire, which I think may be doing the best job of anyone since Martha Stewart at getting its brand all across all media, is becoming a TV network.
Yeah.
Are you excited? Or are you sad? Or how do you feel about this aspect of media that you've got so much of your career invested in the past?
I just wish it had lasted about 10 more years, and it and I could have gone out together. The point that it's not just the magazines; it's the whole ecology of the magazine art. As the magazines decline in significance, talented people are not coming into it. I mean, it's not to say talented people are coming into it, but we used to get a lot of talented people coming into it. Now you've got talented people, making web cartoons, or, more going into television, more going into other media. You're getting a far smaller group of top talented people going into magazines, and you're also losing readership. So it's like talking about the ecology of the Everglades or something. Once you start losing some parts of it, then other parts start shrinking as well, and so the whole enterprise becomes just less vital. And so I see the whole thing declining, and I don't know how long it's going to be before we print the last print magazine, but it may be within sight. It's just there will be organizations, news organizations, and there will be, whatever you want to call them, literary organizations that continue to produce things collaboratively. But I don't know that they will exist in the same way. It's just. I mean, one of the real things that the web has done is killed general interest, it seems to me, and it gives everyone the capacity to find the niche that they're already interested in, to go to the political page that already reinforces their beliefs, to go to the interest page that, left-handed Armenian coin collectors, whatever it is, you can find the page for it, and you too, huh? And so that experience of picking up a newspaper or a magazine, and while you're on the way to the sports page, seeing your eye fall onto some business story or some style story that you would not otherwise have read if it hadn't fallen right into your lap. I mean, that's all kind of diminishing. So, and I think the great shame is that tremendous work was done in this sort of collective way. It wasn't always just the individual writer or whatever. It was the ability of talented editors to work with talented writers and reporters and talented photographers and artists to really create, something vital and energetic and meaningful on a weekly or monthly basis that, I'll miss that. But you just see it. You see the world just not taking an interest in it anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was at the Philadelphia International Airport a couple days ago, and I thought, I haven't bought a magazine in a while. Let me go look at the newsstand. Maybe I can find something for the flight back. And the array of magazines that's left out there is very narrow.
Yep.
The topics, most of them seem to be covering the same things. It just wasn't that interesting. Rolling Stone, I thought, okay, well, maybe there's one story in there that I'd pick up, but do I really want to spend, I don't know, $5-6 for the latest issue of Rolling Stone to read one story and be disinterested? And I just thought, so I was kind of curious to.
The women's magazines are continue to be vital. Mm-hmm. They are profitable, have large circulation, continue to find an audience, that speak in meaningful ways. So that's an interesting thought, that why are they surviving and the traditional men magazines or general interest magazines are not.
Apparently we were all just looking for the pictures.
Maybe. A lot of the special interest magazines are thriving, I still think you can, Esquire, there's lots to read in that every month. Vanity Fair, stuff to read in there every month. I mean, they chase it down and go for it. It's, so there are still places that are doing great work, but again, one used to be able to go to a newsstand and kill an hour just paging through magazine after magazine. Mm-hmm. It's not so easy to do that anymore.
Agreed. Well, folks, listen, you can order Jamie Malanowski's new ebook, The Book of Levon, The Trials and Triumphs of Levon Helm, for just $2.99. You can get it right now at mrmedia.com via Amazon, or you can get it at barnesandnoble.com, bn.com.
And for paperback fans, lulu.com. It still can be had as a paperback.
Oh, an old-fashioned man, are you?
But you have to go to lulu.com.
All right. And Jamie, your website, jamieMalanowski.com.
Yep.
I know that you're on Twitter. And there's a Facebook account for the Book of Levon as well.
Yes, we have a lot of wonderful Levon videos posted there. So you can kill a lot of time. You might have spent it one time reading magazines. You can spend them over at the Book of Levon page looking at videos.
Go ahead and do it. What the hell, folks? We're all heading down that slope, right? All right. Well, Jamie Malanowski, always good to see you, and good luck with the book. Thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You can see and hear almost 1,000 Mr. Media interviews by visiting our main site, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. Or check out the more than 200 video interviews on the Mr. Media radio site on YouTube. And I'd sure appreciate if you'd show some love for Mr. Media's advertisers, including Stitcher. Apple named Stitcher a top 5 news app of 2011. It's a free mobile app for your smartphone or tablet that lets you listen to your favorite shows and discover the best of news, entertainment, and sports on demand. You can listen whenever you want to more than 5,000 shows, get customized recommendations, and discover what your friends are listening to. My own list of Stitcher favorites is pretty eclectic. I start my day with an hour of MSNBC's Morning Joe with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. Then it's the latest 2-minute update from the Onion News Network. After that, I'll listen to WTF with Mark Maron, Here's the Thing with Alec Baldwin, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and excerpts from E's Chelsea Lately and The Soup with Joel McHale. Also in regular rotation on my Stitcher playlist, the BS Report with ESPN's Bill Simmons, the TechCrunch Headlines, and the Don Geronimo Show. The latest episodes of each show, whether originating from broadcasts, cable TV, radio syndication, or podcasts, are continuously updated. Stitcher is a free app for your iPhone, iPad, Kindle, Fire, BlackBerry, Droid, and more. And show your support of Mr. Media by getting, did I mention it's free? The app at stitcher.com/MrMedia. That's stitcher.com/MRmedia. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. We're also supported by Audible. Check out Audible's 30-day trial membership and download the audiobook version of the book everyone's been talking about, 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. Sign up for your free trial today at audible.com/radio. Again, audibletrial.com/radio. And finally, if you need a disc jockey for a wedding, bar mitzvah, corporate event, or just a big old party, please consider calling 1-800-DIAL-DJs, the party authority for all your party entertainment needs. You can call 1-800-DIAL-DJs or go to their website, 1-800-DIAL-DJs.com, and tell them Mr. Media sent you. And thanks for listening. Today's episode of Mr. Media Interviews is brought to you by GoDaddy.com. You know GoDaddy.com from their wild and sexy commercials, but isn't it time you actually test drove their web hosting and domain registration services yourself? For a limited time, Mr. Media listeners can save 10% on the already low price of web hosting services at GoDaddy.com by entering the promo code POD4 at checkout. Again, that's 10% off web hosting when you go to GoDaddy.com and enter the promo code POD4, that's P-O-D, the number 4, at checkout.